Hello, parents and teachers who may be watching. Welcome to Creating Math Ahas for Parents. I'm Dr. Sandy Atkins, Sandy, and I'd like us to spend a little bit of time thinking about fractions. Now, one of the first steps to understanding fractions is being able to make fractional units. Now, your children may be given circular shapes where they're having to cut into 2 equal pieces. 4 equal pieces, 8. And we know when you cut a circle into 2 equal pieces, I could cut it this way or this way, but the diameter of the circle cuts it into 2 equal pieces. They might have shapes that become rectangular shapes, right? There are rectangular shapes that they cut into 2 equal pieces. Okay, so you're wanting them to really get this idea of same size pieces. And I worked with a teacher at one point that used to talk about fair and square with her children. Children understood what it meant to be fair and square, that whatever you get, the other person gets the same amount. So we build on that idea. Now, there are differences between things being symmetrical halves, which mean I can cut it, fold it right on that line, and it folds on top of itself. So we have symmetrical halves, fold on top of them, or we have this where the shapes are the same shape, but they aren't symmetrical halves. If I fold on that line, it's not going to fold on top of itself. There will be overlap. So we want your children to be able to cut into 2, but to be able to check that the pieces are the same size, okay? Now, we could cut in 4 equal pieces. So we usually, or I usually have them cut in 2, 4, 8. So it's a repeated halving, and then 3 and 6 when we're starting out. Okay, so just getting comfortable with some of that flexibility. Now, I mentioned in one of the introductory videos that I started my career teaching high school math. So when I first started working with elementary students years and years ago, I had the opportunity to work with a very talented group of teachers at a K-4 elementary school. And one of the things they let me do was do some lessons with the children and learn about how children at that level think and interact and talk. And so I was going to do a fraction lesson. I had a big sheet of chart paper and I had drawn a circle on it, similar to what you see on the screen, and I had cut it unevenly, but labeled both pieces 1/2. And I was thinking of this fair and square idea. And I asked the children what they thought, and they didn't say anything. They just sat very politely in this circle looking at me. And so I cut it and I said, well, if this was a pie or cake, I used the food reference that we quite often do with fractions. And I said, what would you think? No. And I gave one piece, the larger piece, to one of the children, the smaller piece, still nothing. I started cutting these pieces up into uneven sized pieces and kept on with that food theme and said, gosh, if this was cake or pie and you got this piece, what would you think? Nothing. At the end, every child had a little piece of paper. Some had big chunks, some had little slivers. And I said again, if this was cake, pie, I kept going. I was just hoping children would say something. Finally, the first little girl that I had given the big section to raises her hand, and I was so hopeful. I said, what do you think? And she said, well, Mrs. Smith says it's better to have something than nothing, and you should be happy that you have anything at all. Now, the way Mrs. Smith was handling some of the conflicts going on in the room, or any of that unhappiness, perhaps with some of their shares, really did not help this fraction lesson. But you see, we're trying to get them to understand same size, and we can only label it that half if they are the same size. And I learned my lesson early on. Don't underestimate the power of those behavior moves that the teachers do, right? That the way that they handle conflict in their rooms might be an issue for fractions, yeah. Now, I want to keep on with the 4 equal pieces. talked about same size. Now we could have congruent sections, same size, same shape. And sometimes there's confusion when we use the diagonals to cut a rectangle into 4 equal pieces. Because if you look at these, the two on the sides aren't the same shape as the two on the tops, as far as congruent shapes. All are triangular, right? But see, if I cut one of those triangles, right, that obtuse triangle, if I cut that in half and I pretended there was a hinge where that dot is, and I could just swing that triangle over, the one on the right over, you'd end up with the same shape as one of those side triangles. So we could have same size areas, right? That would give it 4 equal pieces, but we're thinking of equal areas. So it can add some complexity here. Now I want to go back to the circle and cutting it into 2 equal pieces. We think about, that's not very interesting because you just cut the diameter, that's it. But see, I could cut it something like this, and those would be 2 equal pieces. And typically our test is cut it out, turn it around, flip it over, and see if the pieces are the same size, okay? I could do the same thing with a rectangle. I showed cutting the rectangle into 4 equal pieces at one point, right? So we have 2 equal pieces here, the L shapes, I could cut them out, turn them, same size. But now see here, I take that L shape and cut it. How about those? Would those be 4 equal pieces? Okay, so it can get more interesting. So you will find that your children may be doing things with paper and cutting. They may be using dough or Play-Doh, and I've shown that in other videos. That's forgiving, that they can cut, test it, see how it works without using up lots of materials that way. We may use cookie cutters as the starting shape and then cut those into 4, 8. Excuse me, 2, 4, 8, 3, 6 equal pieces, right? But do you notice how I'm saying equal piece language, trying to get that fair and square idea into their minds, all right? So again, one of the first steps for understanding fractions is being able to make fractional units and understand that it could have same size areas, not just exact same shapes, that sometimes we may want to cut and test it. But if you notice, I didn't talk about modeling. I'm not showing them how to make it. It's giving them the chance to experience, to play, and to try their hand at trying to cut things in 2, 4, or 8. As I said, I start with repeated halving, 3 and 6, and give them that chance to struggle a bit at first, perhaps. But that will build their confidence as they keep going and conquer that ability to create fractional units, fraction pieces. I hope this video was helpful. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up or share with others that might find it helpful. If you would, please consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks to those who have already. Click on that notifications bell so you know when other videos are available. Thanks so much for watching.